lost neighborhood and of its people who did not want to go.
I don't want no money. I want my home. The old man is old. See how the old man is old? And I'm old. That's enough. I don't want to get out. I sent my two daughters. They don't want to get out because they spend a lot of money. Plenty of money they spend in this place. We're not getting out for nobody. Never.
Hi, welcome to the West End Video Newsletter. Tonight is sort of a sad night for me because this is going to be the last show. After 18 years, I'm ready to put it to rest. We've been doing this for 18 years. I started, I think it was in 87, and I took classes here and everything, and we slowly moved into doing the show, and it's been running for 18 years. I've just turned 65, and I've got to the point where I don't think I can do it anymore. It's just taking too much of my time. I liked it, I enjoyed it. We've had a whole lot of people here over the years. We've looked at the old West End from just about every angle, from eminent domain to people's rights and historical aspects. It's just been a long run, and unfortunately, I have to give it up. Everything has its time, and this is its time. We've had, in the old days, we've had a lot of different people on. We've had reporters. Peter Lucas, who used to be at the Herald, he used to write a column on the op-ed page, who was a former West Ender. He came on quite a few times, and he talked about the West End. He used to write about all the different politicians, and he was very helpful to our cause. Peter Gelzinis, who is still with the Herald, and he writes, he's been on the show 2 or 3 times. He's a very effective writer, and he's a good man. He's written more than one story about us in the papers. Al Lupo, he was a Globe reporter, and he still is. Now he's writing for the Herald, which is strange. He moved over, which I always thought was a much better fit for him. We've had all types of politicians from Boston, Medford, Somerville. Ed Flynn was, Ed Flynn was here too. We've done about 2 or 3 shows with Ed Flynn. Ed Flynn came to a West End Mass that we have every year called the Mass for Deceased West Enders, and he showed up one day. That's Ray Flynn's son. We had Ray Flynn on the show about 5 times anyway. He's a great guest. He's a great guy to bring in. You just sit him there, and you can talk about, he knows what he's talking about, and he can talk forever on it. He's a great man, and I have a lot of respect for him. He helped us out immensely when he was mayor of Boston. He was the only mayor that ever did help us out, and for that I deeply appreciate him. We've had different people like Herb Gans, who everybody knows wrote the book Urban Villages. We had him on tape. He's never been here live, but when he came into Boston, we went over there and interviewed him and taped him, and he wrote the book Urban Villages. And that's the first time that Urban Villages was used. It was used in connection with the West End of Boston. We are the original urban villages. Later, everybody decided to take up that term. Right now, they call this place an urban village and that place an urban village. But at one time, I was at a BRA meeting, and the guy at the BRA was talking about building urban villages all over the place, and I got up and told him, look, I was from the old West End, and that was, the term urban villages came from the old West End. Urban village is a term for the West End. I said, are you going to tear all these buildings down? Is that why you're building urban villages? He didn't appreciate that, but so much. Matter of fact, we had the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal did a story on us one time, and he came down, and we had him here. He was the reporter, Barry Newman. He was sitting here watching us. We had Paul Donato from now. He was running for his rep seat back then. And afterwards, we went out and had a few drinks, and his name was put into the Wall Street Journal. He really liked that. He got mentioned in the Wall Street Journal article when it came out. Paul's a good man. He helped us out. He got us $40,000 for the West End Museum, and he's a good man. The studio, I've been here now for 18 years, and I look around this studio, and it just seems I'm going to miss it a lot. I really hate stopping this, but the circumstances are, mean that I have to give it up. It's just time. We've had Tom O'Connor, historians. We've had the Bostonian Society on here. We've had just about everybody you can think of at one time or another. And everybody says, how can you do so many shows, right? There's only so much you can do about the West End. But we've turned it around, and we always found a different aspect to bring in. We've had people like John O'Connor, who was running the electric deregulation. He was trying to defeat electric deregulation. It proved he was right. John spent a lot of time and money, and he really didn't have to, but he said, you're going to eventually pay in more money for electricity. I mean, how could you not? Because you have to you have to pay people to run the lines and people to run the factories. You get two entities, right, that have two separate bookkeeping, two separate everything. There's no such thing as having a middleman and the price going down. You put a middleman into any kind of business, the price goes up. He was right. Unfortunately, John died about 3 years ago. He was playing basketball and just flopped on the basketball court. From John O'Connor to Tom O'Connor, the historian. Tom O'Connor was a professor at BC for a lot of years, and he's written about the city of Boston over and over. Matter of fact, he did a Channel 2 tape about, it was called Boston the Way We Were, and it showed, matter of fact, I think we had some of our stuff involved in there. He got a lot of the stuff from the Bostonian Society and different people that they had, and it was interesting. History is probably the biggest part of what we've been doing here. We did a lot of it with the Bostonian Society. We did a lot of it with the library in Boston. We went all over. We have the West End Museum. The West End Museum is now, we're putting up, trying to re-establish the exhibit that was at the Bostonian Society, which it's taken a lot of work. The people that put it together are no longer around. I mean, what we're trying to do is put that exhibit back. It probably won't get put back exactly as we had it, but we'll eventually get it. And everybody should come down to the West End Museum and see it. We also took a lot of stuff out of the West Ender, which is my print magazine, our newspaper, and all these years we have had different stories and different things. We've had 2 stories on veterans. We did at least 2 or 3 shows on veterans over the years, veterans from the West End, because they didn't have, they tore down all the memorials for former West Enders everywhere. But the city finally put up a plaque with deceased West Enders up there. The only problem was I've been getting phone calls saying why I didn't put different people's names on them, and I got to tell everybody I had nothing to do with the plaque. The city put the plaque up there and they put the names on it, and I have angry people calling me up and saying, why isn't so-and-so's name and why isn't so-and-so's name on there? I had nothing to do with it. It was the city's, and they made the decision who to go up there and how to put it there. So, I say we had Jane Jacobs on tape. We went to she had a couple talks up in BC way back. It's a long time ago. And we interviewed her. Now Jane Jacobs wrote the book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. I know a lot of people probably don't remember it, but most architects and city planners and everything consider her the guru of urban planning. She came up with things like eyes on the street. If you have people on the street selling, we'll say, vendors and people doing that type of thing, you get less crime because there are people out there that can spot what people are doing. The less people you have on the street, the more crime you have, because nobody's watching them. Like I say, we've had effort in just about every angle. We took pictures of us picketing our partners when they turned us down. They didn't turn us down. They took us out of the. We sued them for rights for the West Enders, and they said because we sued, we no longer had the right to be partners with them in the West End place. But we ended up picketing them, and we've done shows on that. Matter of fact, we did one show on our partners. We had chairs with their names on it because they wouldn't come on the show and explain why they didn't go through with what they were supposed to do, and why the city didn't hold their feet to the fire. Never did figure that out. The West End was a unique place. I was glad to grow up in it. I spent a lot of time from playing stickball and errors and all the different games of the streets that kids don't do today. In the old days, people used to do all those things. Kids would go out. Now they have Nintendos and television and all that. When we were kids, there was always 30 or 40 of us running up and down the streets, playing all the different street games, from what they call punch ball to, handball, and then you'd go down the park, and in the summertime there'd be sailing, and we had 2 settlement houses. Well, I don't know if you call them settlement houses, and now they're like more or less like the West End house was a boys and girls club. It was always a boys club, but now it's become a boys and girls club, and they're going into like computers, and they have a whole different range of activities that we didn't have when we were kids. With us, it was just keep us busy. Throw a basketball at us, and we'd run around for 2 hours or something. We used to have dances too. That was a highlight. On Friday nights, you'd go to either the West End house or the Peabody house, and they would have these dances. And you're 14 years old, and you meet a 14-year-old girl, and you're dancing with them, and you feel that's the height of your ambition. Life changes, but in those days, those were all the sweet times. And I think everybody remembers the sweet times of when they were growing up. With us, it was, in the street. And it was amazing because you had so many friends, and you did so many things with each another. There was this camaraderie that kept everybody close. To this day, I still see a lot of my friends that I grew up in different places. Matter of fact, there's one place out in Medford, the mall on Thursdays, and there's a whole host of people that go there, and they meet in the food area, and they're all there talking. I mean, most of them are, most of us, most former West Enders are like between 50 and 80 or 50 and 90. And I guess this, we're coming to the end of an era. Most of us are dying off. I used to have 4,000 people on my mailing list for my print newsletter. I only have about 1,000 now. It's slowly condensing, and it's pretty soon, like I'm 65, and I was only 19 when I moved out of the West End, so it just keeps going. We just keep shrinking in number. And unfortunately, we go to a lot of wakes, and it's just a long, drawn-out time. I hope that, everybody will remember the West End. I hope the West End Museum will keep going. We're putting it together. We're hoping to get an endowment that will keep it going, and the memory of the West End will stay up, because a lot of people don't realize it was one of the few ethnically and racially mixed neighborhoods. It's if you're watching this and you don't know where it was from the government center down to the river. Matter of fact, the north slope of Beacon Hill was also considered part of the West End, from Myrtle Street down around to where the garden is today, where the Fleet Center is. That was all part of the West End, and it was all tenements. At one point, there was 22,000 people living in the West End. When they tore it down in '58, between '58 and '62, there were only about 12,000 people in that area. Now you're talking about 50 acres. There was only about 50 acres of land, and the politics was rich. I mean, the politics in the West End, there's a street called LeMasney Way now. He was called the West End Mahatma. He used to, well, he started off as a paper boy in front of St. Joseph's church, and he eventually worked his way up. He became a ward healer and ward boss, and he was he developed politics into such a way that you couldn't get elected in the West End without his approval. And there were all types. There was George Leary, who was, matter of fact, when he died, he was 92. About 2 years before he died, I was sitting down on a bench with him, talking to him, and he told me that story. He said, I asked him how politics was in his day, and he said, well, Jim, he said, you had to walk around, he said, with a pocket full of silver. He said, he had dimes, quarters, halves, and silver dollars, and depending on how hard a luck story they gave you, you gave him a dime, a quarter, a half. That was like, you know, in between, we'll say, his era was from about 1910 to about 1960, when they eventually tore the West End down. He was a good man. There were a lot of good politicians that came out of the West End. There were a lot of judges too that came out of the West End. The West End, I guess it was either, you know, there were a lot of people that got into business. So a lot of West Enders made it big in business. A lot of them, well, like anywhere else, there was, you know, like Southie, you had your Whitey Bulges. We've had some of that element too. But over the hall, the West End had many prominent people. There was a lot of judges, matter of fact, we were on the foot of Beacon Hill, and it's strange because Suffolk University was just a law school in the early days. What happened was that all the legislators would cross the street over to the Suffolk Law and get their law degree at night, and they became so prominent because of, you know, the legislators being part of their alumni and everything. They eventually became a full-scale university, and today they have, you know, there are many disciplines, you know, liberal arts, law, just about anything you could think of. The West End was, you know, was a varied place. Cambridge Street, ran right through it over the Longfellow Bridge. I have a picture in my latest newsletter, and there's a beach there, and it's amazing because when you look at the picture, when I gave it to my typesetter, I gave it to her, and she says, "Where's that, Revere Beach?" Now, most people don't realize this, but if you look at this picture, the only way you can really tell that it's in the West End and on the Charles Bank was the Bridge of the Lechmere running over in the background. Otherwise, you couldn't tell. We used to swim off the bridge, the Longfellow Bridge. The beach was right beside it. If you were looking at Cambridge, the bridge was to the right, and we used to swim right there. And you'd go up on the granite steps and the granite. They had these big reels, granite reels. You would lay on them. Some would heat them up, and after you got through swimming, you'd lay down on them, and you'd warm up. It was a great time. Of course, the river was a little tricky because there were different holes and currents in there that if you weren't a real good swimmer, you could drown. People had drowned there. I don't remember the figures, but a lot of them had drowned. There was this big oak tree in the West End, too, in the park, before they made Storrow Drive. They ran Storrow Drive right through this beautiful park. It wasn't Olmsted that designed that part of the park. That was done by, I forgot, some other prominent architect, but he had a prominent name, too. And they had all these trees, and it was a well-balanced park. But then, matter of fact, Charles Street, down by Charles River Park, was a 4-lane highway with a grassy median strip in the middle. And when they did Storrow Drive, they wiped out all of Charles Street, and they ran the expressway right through the park. There were these 2 big hills and all these bushes and trees. It was a great park, and this big oak tree, and the branches were real low. People used to climb that oak tree. Everybody that lived in the West End, you could tell if they came from the West End because at some time or other they climbed that tree, unless you were an immigrant. You know, immigrants went to work and that was it. You know, it wasn't like today. Matter of fact, most kids, you know, had to work. You either shined shoes or sold newspapers or did something or other. I shined shoes up in Scully Square, and all the sailors used to come through, and Scully Square was bustling at that time. There was the Crawford House and the Old Howard, and now they did all the urban renewal, and you go up there at night and you can hear, you know, and there's nobody there. In those days, there were people coming and going, and it was really hectic. It was a really busy, Scully Square was really a busy square. Like the Crawford House, where they had strippers, the same as the as the old Howard. Life was much better in those days. Not better in the sense that, let me preface that, not better in the sense that you had a lot of things. You didn't have a lot of things. But the human interaction was much better than it is today. Now everybody has, they sit in their houses and they don't feel they have to go over somebody else's house. They don't visit half the time they don't visit their relatives. In those days, relatives were in and out of your house just about every week, and people would always, you know, there was always something going on. And the biggest compliment you could do to somebody was to take out a bottle and put it on the table, or take out some food, because most people don't realize in those days, when I was growing up, food was scarce. It's not like today. Like my son goes in when he was younger and opens the door and goes, "Oh, there's nothing to eat," and my refrigerator is loaded, you know. And our day, I can remember my brother making mayonnaise sandwiches because he was starving. But that was a different era, and we grew up in it. And human interaction was much better. People learned to live with each other. There was a give and take among people because they knew they had to live together in close quarters. Then came the Lawnmower Society, and everybody moved out to the suburbs, and with their little lawn and their little cape, and everybody was happy. But I don't think that it was the same as when you were living in the city. I know I spent a lot of time in the North End too. The North End was another place that was very interesting. A little different because it was just basically Italian, and I had a good time. I played football in the North End for about 5 or 6 years. I had a great time. The West End, on the other hand, was there was 24 different ethnic and racial groupings, and it's strange, but you know, when you grow up with all different people, you learn how to be a lot tolerant of different people. And not only that, the foods were different. I mean, you learned how to eat like Albanians and Italians, you know, and everybody was eating. My mother was Lithuanian. I'm half Italian, half Lithuanian. And my mother used to make potato pancakes on Friday, latkes to, you know, if you want to go to the real name. And she'd have a line out the door. She'd be making those and flipping them, and people would be coming taking them. There'd be kids, all kinds of kids in my house, and they'd be lined up, and each one would take a potato pancake and run down the stairs. But that was a different era, a different life. And life certainly has changed since those days. And I guess we're coming somewhere to the end of this. And what I miss most of those days is the interaction between friends and your family. We seem like it's a different world, and I'm not entirely sure I like it. I have more money. I have, you know, a whole lot of things. I own a house, and you know, I'm much better monetarily, but I don't know if I'm much better spiritually. You know, people's families were like they would come in, and now it's just that everything seems empty. Life has changed over these years, and I guess that's why I started this show, to try to bring back some of that. And in a way, I did. I've brought back some of that feeling and the camaraderie, and people call, you know, they used to call me up after they see the show, and but as we're getting older and people are dying, I don't get the same interaction anymore, and everybody's moving out and dying, and we don't have a hell of a lot of West Enders left around. But I hope any of you who have been watching us consistently over the years, you will realize that whatever we've shown you, we were showing you a way of life that no longer exists. I basically we're dinosaurs. West Enders are dinosaurs, and nobody really cares that the city came in and smashed down a whole neighborhood anymore. They talk about it, and urban planners talk about it, but nobody really cares. They say, "Oh yeah, that was nice, but that was a long time ago. Won't happen again." And it's happening everywhere. I mean, they use that as an excuse. So. I guess as we come to the end of this, I've been a little long-winded. I've been looking back at, you know, what we've done and what we've accomplished. So I guess this is my final show, and I want to tell everybody I'm glad you've watched us over the years, and hopefully maybe, who knows, even maybe we'll come back someday, you know, and do a show here and a show there. But it's been a long run. We've talked on a whole host of subjects, too many for me to. And I know I'm a little long-winded tonight, but this is my last show, and you got to cut me a little slack, and. I want all of you, you know, everybody out there that has watched the show to, you know, to realize that I'm going to miss this. I'm going to miss doing it. I'm going to miss talking about the West End, you know, on a constant basis. And like I say, we've had historians on. We've had the whole schmear. And I don't know if anybody's still interested in the West End. Like I say, we've done it over and over again. We've reached a plateau where we've just about touched every conceivable part of what the West End was like. We've done shows on kids' games, on politicians. Politicians I really like because I enjoyed talking to them. I also did a lot of campaigns as I was growing up. There were certain politicians that were running, and we used to do sound trucks, and you'd stand out in front of the polling place, and you'd hold signs, which reminds me of a story that LeMasney used to. He would do anything for you. He was the ward boss, and he would do anything for you as long as you voted the right way. And how he knew if you voted the right way or not was he would give you hard lead pencils, so when you made your mark and you closed your ballot, he could tell, depending on where your mark was, if you had voted the right way or not. If you hadn't voted the right way, you would never get anything from him. But if you kept voting the right way, he would give you coal, you know, if you needed food or you needed a job, he would do just about anything for you. And that was the West End Mahatma. There's been books written about him, and some people chastise him and some people praise him. But he was a solid politician. He died in the 30s, and I guess, you know, that's, everybody goes. We're all reaching that point. I guess that, you know, the West End is, you know, my West End is dead, okay? It has died. They tore it down and killed it. And now that all of us West Enders are growing old, and there's less and less of us, pretty soon, even the memory of the West End will be dead. The only thing that will keep it alive is the West End Museum, which we have really been seriously trying to get an endowment for. We have some money, and we have some money coming in, but that'll be the end of it. I just well, that's the end of the show. That's the end of my run. That's the end of everything. I'm glad you've been here to watch me, and I'm glad that you were watching, and I guess that's the end of it. I'm going to cut off now. I guess I won't be seeing you at the next West End video newsletter.